Hello, everybody. I'm Arshia Lokhandwala. I'm from San Francisco, and so excited to have Pushpamala Shalini in Delhi, and we are going online. This webinar is in conjunction with the exhibition that I have curated, Living the New Normal in These Extraordinary Times, which I've curated for MASH India. And this is an exhibition of 5 women artists, including Anita Dubey, Shilpa Gupta, Desprajakta Potnis, Pushpamala, and Mithu Sen. So, as you know, we are all together at this particular moment. It's a challenging time, and the show is kind of looking at the whole idea of the uncanny. And very, very excited to have Pushpamala dawn in a beautiful avatar as Phantom Lady. And thank you, Shalini, for joining us from Delhi. And I just thought I'd introduce the panel.
Yeah.
So, to begin with, yeah, hi.
Hi.
So Shalini, as we all know, is a Delhi-based artist and avid collector. In 2018, she began the foundation and MASH, a digital platform that explores the intersections of architecture, art, craft, design, and fashion. Pushpamala, who needs actually no introduction, is very well known for a sharp and witty feminist work and for a rejection of authenticity and embracing of multiple realities. She is one of the pioneers of conceptual art in India and a leading figure in the feminist experiments in subject, material, and language, and innovative work in sculpture, conceptual photography, video, performance, art in India. So, Pushpa, lovely to see you. Hello. And I'm excited that I'm showing your work, The Return of the Phantom Lady, Sin City, a sequel to your 1996 to 1998 work, Phantom Lady or Kismat. The fact that I included this in this particular exhibition was also kind of cornered around COVID, which is around this whole conspiracy, including governments, including the virus, including all kinds of things, and a parallel that we are hoping that maybe you will unravel as Phantom Lady. So I'd like to invite you to start with possibly talking about the return of Phantom Lady, which parallels your early body of work, and also what you call a photo romance. So could you tell us a little bit about the whole process about thinking and unpack this for us?
Yeah. Ashia, the first Phantom Lady was done because you were organizing a show on cinema in Bombay. So finally, I never did give a work for that, but it sort of expanded into this, what I later called a photo romance. So the photo romance itself was a very popular form which emerged from 1930s fascist Italy. And actually, apparently it was created for these working class women, and then it became so popular that it spread throughout the world. In fact, Fellini has made fun of that. So, but mine has no text; it's just images, and sometimes I even mix up the images so you can have different stories. And so that was a tough act to follow. Though everyone loved it, so they didn't take it seriously, and they said, "When are you doing the next one?" But it was almost 10 years later that Majlis Cultural Center in Bombay was doing this big festival on cinema called Cinema City, which had artists and architects and filmmakers and different kinds of people working, on this huge body of of work. So I was invited by the co-curator Archana Hande to do a sequel to Phantom Lady based on cinematic locations. So that was nice because it would have been very difficult. Phantom Lady is very much about Bombay. So because of course one of the characters is based on is Nadia, fearless Nadia, who was a big icon in Hindi cinema in the 30s and 40s. And it was also the first Phantom Lady of Kismet was also about the city of Bombay. So this was very exciting for me because of course I'm a cinephilic. I'm cinephilic, and then someone would help me get permissions for set up and organize things for me. Yeah. So then I had a problem. So I had bumped off. The first one was about the good and bad sister. So I like to use these kind of archetypes, I would say, rather than stereotypes, and which come through from whether the myths and Puranas to popular culture. And but then it was that bad sister was bumped off in the first one. So I was wondering what the plot would be about. And then another thing that was very interesting was that the first one was sort of just at the beginnings of liberalization. So the whole story about the Indian economy, the mafia, was about smuggling, because you couldn't get all these foreign things and there were a lot of restrictions. So there were all these stories of people going with a half a 100 rupee note and delivering gold or something to this other guy with the other half. But now the times had changed. So when I shot in, I think 2009 or 2010 in Bombay, it was all about real estate. So it was about land in the countryside and about real estate in the city. So the underlying story of, though it's not very obvious, of Return of Phantom Lady is about real estate mafia. And so the Phantom Lady is investigating. She's this kind of outsider detective, and she's investigating something mysterious. So it's all very mysterious and dark, and I've used the film noir style again, except I decided to use color so that it could be distinguished from the earlier one, which was in black and white. And I worked a lot on the color because I grew up reading all these crime fiction, so it was like these cheap covers of these, the colors were based on the cheap colors of, Perry Mason books or whatever, so I pumped up the colors and there were certain kinds of gradations and all that. And so who is there has to be another protagonist. So of course there's this mysterious villain, which is Atul Dodia, who loves villains. And so then there's what was the story. So I've always been very fascinated with these young girls. A girl aged around 10 or 11, pre-puberty actually, was this gangly kind of age. So I was looking around for one, and that was I found one in Tushar's daughter. In fact, she was having her exams at the time, but she was so sporting, and the parents were so sporting that they allowed her to act in this. So the whole story is about innocence rescuing innocence, because I rescue this girl, and then we're being chased, and I'm doing these investigations, and they're being chased through Bombay. So I use the story actually to hang these different narratives of Bombay. So then there's this Bandra Kurla complex, which is this new Bombay, and then there's the Dharavi, and then there's the single screen cinema, Bharat Mata. Each one of them have histories. Then there's Borai fishing village, then there's PM Road office, and so on. Each one has its own history in Bombay, and it's also to do with real estate somehow. In fact, when I was shooting that particular day in Bharat Mata cinema, I think MNS or Shiv Sena, I forget who, they were actually protesting outside because they wanted to, I think the lease was over and the theater was going to be knocked down or something. Finally, they saved it. But Dharavi, of course, they wanted to redevelop it. And then with BKC and the old drive-in cinema, apparently the new drive-in cinema is coming up. But immediately after I shot, the old drive-in cinema was demolished, and it's part of actually. So which is in BKC, which is the new kind of economics and the new economic zone.
Wonderful. Thank you. Shalini, did you have a question?
Yeah, would you like to, so the cinema is a major influence in your work, as evident from the cinematic noir images of the city featured in The Adventures of the Phantom Lady. What were some of your primary influences from cinema or otherwise for this body of work?
Lots of things actually. Sometimes they're just underground, and I mean, of course, it was a continuation of the kind of partly the stunt film genre, popular cinema, then this whole character of the outsider and a Zorro-like figure who comes and saves the people in a sense. But in my work, also very vulnerable, because if you see the actual Zorro-like films it's all over the it's international, in international cinema, popular cinema, they always win, but I'm always vulnerable even at the end, So it's also about this woman being in the city. So this woman kind of negotiating the dark city. And then the film noir kind of, but I changed the genre from the action genre to a film noir, which is far more dark and psychological. Then there's some strange things that come up actually. 2-3 references at least have been pointed out to me. There was one scene in the old drive-in theater where there's a room with there were a lot of these anthropomorphic looking actually things wrapped in plastic, which were actually film projectors. So there were 10-12 large film projectors in one of the rooms of the drive-in theater. And then somehow I had this fixed idea that I had to pose. I mean, I had to sort of be photographed, hiding behind, peering out from behind this projector with my head on top of Katya's head. That was the little girl. And after I shot it, I realized that it was actually, it was this underground memory of this very famous poster of Chaplin's The Kid, where Chaplin and the kid are peering from behind a wall and their heads are exactly in the same position. And then another image which I didn't even realize was there is a picture in the Bharat Mata cinema where Atul as the villain and I are facing each other. And from the side, there is a painting. There were two paintings on either side of the screen. And I didn't know there's this man's portrait. And Atul actually identified it as Dada Saheb Phalke. So I like these kinds of things, like by happenstance or consciously, which come into my work, which give it different layers, So there's cinema about cinema and Dada Saheb Phalke as the, pioneer of cinema coming in there. Another very interesting thing was when I was shooting in Bharat Mata, the latest film that was being shown there was the Marathi film Natrang with Atul Kulkarni. And Natrang is actually a film about Tamasha, which is the folk theatre of Maharashtra. And so there was this, so I asked the projectionist to actually project a song, which, when I was shooting and I shot in front of it. So I love these references. I love, film about film, film about theatre. So there's different kinds of things, coming into the, what seems to be a very kind of funny little story, which actually expands it. And also some things like, for example, I chose the photographs, images with the scenes of these people, audience watching the tamasha from Natrang, which actually bring in a whole lot of, without me having to hire them or have them act, they bring in a whole lot of working class faces, for instance, into this whole thing, which is actually the stories about the rich and the poor and that old thing, which is very real, but it's also a cliche of cinema from the beginning of time and about the great city, the metropolis. And I think that's very, very relevant now. And again, about Dharavi, as a site, very funny stories because when I used to live in Bombay, I was doing sculpture and I'd actually fired some small terracotta works in the Dharavi Kubarwada. So I wanted to shoot over there. So I like my work also to have these autobiographical elements. I think it makes it more real and more kind of rich. So then Madhushri, I think Majlis got me, but I didn't know anyone there now. So she gave me the contact of one of the potters over there in the Kubarwada. So when I went to meet him, like actually everyone was very hostile. And they said, what, shoot over there? They thought it was a film. And he said, no, and all that. They thought actually after Slumdog Millionaire, what had been happening was every week a foreign team came and wanted to shoot Dharavi poverty, basically. I think now they've got wisened up and they're actually having these poverty tours in Dharavi. But then I told him, look, it's just me, my photographer, and one more person will be there to help. And it's not a film, it's just some photographs. Then I roped him in also. He's also there, as a character. And there again, it's always this happenstance and this serendipity and all that. Like even in the first Phantom Lady, I sort of expanded. Otherwise, there were just two of us actually, who were characters, formal characters acting, performing in the series. And what I did was I got in people from the street and people in the railway stations and people in the restaurants and Irani cafes and all that. And similarly in this, people who are just there, they also become characters in this, and therefore it sort of, it makes it more real. And so there's this whole thing between fiction and reality, and I'm always playing with that, which I find very interesting.
That's wonderful to hear. And I remember that one of the shots, which it was shot in one of the smallest and the tiniest places that I've ever visited, with Atul Dodia and me. So it was just something that I'll never forget. Actually, I don't even know where it was. But it was so
office room. this is a little office on PN Road. So PN Road again is like the center of the business in India. Like, you know, Bombay, of course, is the business city, a finance city of the center of finance. But the real estate is so expensive that everyone has these tiny holes, you know. And so they try to expand it by, of course, putting this kind of temporary steel structure to make a mezzanine floor, and then all within this one small room. And then there were mirrors on the walls everywhere, which was very amusing because obviously that's an old interior decor kind of trick to make spaces look bigger. But there was this very shabby little business office, you know. It was a little lawyer's office. And there again, there was some legal case going on. So we had to do everything hush hush. And I remember, Ashia, I think you just come back from New York. So I rang you up and I told you, just put on a mini skirt and put on a suit, and then you're going to be playing the Dawn's assistant. Come immediately. I think I landed up there in half an hour or something like that. And this Atul Dodia, of course, he doesn't smoke. So while we were shooting, I mean, it goes on and on and on, like, you know, even though this was supposed to be very fast. And I think for about 2 hours, he had to almost chain smoke and then try and blow rings and have this. I wanted this pall of smoke, you know, all around him. So there again, like, you know, this villain, unlike the earlier ones who were like Ajit or something like that, they're now kind of businessmen, smaller, bigger, and actually operate under like maybe you know, maybe it was a real estate office or something like that, very small one, which is like a front, and actually they're billionaires or something like that. And so there's this funny thing of him wearing a hat, which is a kind of convention in Hindi films for a long time. Of course, nobody really wears hats in India. So there are all these kind of strange things going on, you know.
Yeah. So another thing that I really felt about your body of work was you love the idea of storytelling, of course, and the whole idea of the narrative. And there's always this good over evil. So it comes through in a lot of your body of work. So what exactly are you going, or where are you going with that?
I don't think all my work is
yeah,
but because I've done different kinds of work. And yeah, a lot, I mean, I wouldn't say that, but these two, yeah. But I think in these two, I'm dealing with some of these stories or these myths around the metropolis. And of course, Bombay is the great metropolis of India, which is in the, you know, popular imagination. No, I wouldn't say like all my work is about good and evil as such. But it's about different things like class and caste and you know, ethnography, now eugenics. But I don't think Phantom Lady as such, the two deal with some of those things. But I try to sort of be self-critical, and that is one thing that in terms of caste and class and privilege and so on. And so I think that self-criticality is there, like, I mean, it sort of manifests itself in humor and satire and irony. But I think that's, yeah, this is an important point, because when people ask me, why do you have to be there in the work? Of course, I don't have to be there. But what happens is that I become culpable. I'm also part of that, what I'm critiquing, you know, in a sense. So I don't want to, I think, I don't want to be in a position where I say, oh, so-and-so is bad, and take on this kind of moral high ground in a sense. So there's that kind of a strange thing where I may be, even when I recreate an image, maybe I may be critiquing that image, but I'm also loving it. I'm also part of it, and I'm loving playing that image. So there's this kind of thing going on. As I said, I love playing with these dualities, and I'm constantly doing that in all my work, I think.
So I would like to ask a question. Costumes, props, and sets play an important role in the photo romances that you create. What is the process of acquiring? This is very So what is the process of acquiring and selecting these costumes and props? What aspects do you keep in mind while making these selections? And you can show that again if you...
Yeah.
Yeah. No. See, what I do is I don't normally create it out of the blue, these characters. So I have reference points. So I'm constantly, without anything much in mind, there's various kinds of things I'm interested in. So I'm constantly collecting images, postcards, books, of course, and so on, which are all like sort of the pseudo archive in my head. So I'm drawing on those things. Sometimes, of course, like when I recreate uh, existing images, like it's there and I have to make those things. So it's a complex process, actually. It takes me several months. People don't realize, they think when people, sometimes even critics, I'm sorry to report, when they see my work, they think I've just photoshopped my face onto some existing thing. But if you look closely, it's an elaborate tableau that has been set up, or in fact, some of the photo romances, of course, are shot outdoors. So I don't have to, I already have the set, as it were. So there are two different ways of working. So I'll just start with the outdoor, because Phantom Lady is about that. So what I do is I do this kind of looking at sites. So I go with a photographer or sometimes on my own and take some pictures. I go around to different likely places and take some pictures. And so I have that as a reference. And then I actually create the story or the scene out of the place. For example, in Return of Phantom Lady, to come to that, the single screen theater, that Bharat Mata theater was fabulous. I shot several of the shots there. So I said, what could it be, What is the story about this theater? Why should I shoot in this theater, Okay, land and all that, blah, blah, but how does it make any sense? And basically, what's been happening with all this kind of real estate boom is that there are a lot of these old buildings, and they're suddenly set on fire, or they suddenly, there's a mysterious fire or something like that, and everything burns down, and then the whole thing is knocked down and a mall is built or whatever it is. So here, the story is that there is one scene where I'm looking around the theater, and there is one scene when I go into the projection room, which I love. I wanted to get in the projection room because it looks fantastic. And so then what to do in that projection room? There is a bomb there. And where is that bomb? Obviously in a film can. So Tushar actually made I asked him to make the bomb. So he did some research on the web and all that, and he created this bomb with some wires. So I'm actually shown opening. There was a pile of film cans there. That's how I got the idea. So I opened that film can, and you can see, if you look closely, there are some wires and all that inside. So yeah, they're different. Then when I actually recreate an existing image, and many times it's a kind of historical image or elaborate image, it's very complicated. And the way I, some things I hire, some things I borrow from friends, which I cannot hire, and then some things we buy. And in terms of props and costumes, some parts of the costume I get tailored, and some things I look at all this stuff. So it's all this, nobody can make this. Actually, this was made in Bombay by I'm forgetting the name of this guy, the famous theater costume guy. So because it's difficult to cut the cape. And this, I think, some normal tailor made and so on. Yeah, so there are all these funny looking things which have to be sometimes made by a costume guy. They may not have things like this, but for example, if I want to do a mythological Indian character, they will of course have the costumes and so on.
Yeah, wonderful. So any trilogy planned, Pushpa? What's next after Phantom Lady returns?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a trilogy, because I think it becomes too much unless there's something like this. I can't even, I don't want to spoil the first two by, that was the problem with doing the second one. Even though I could even have done a series with myself as this Phantom Lady character and different kinds of things. You need to, as I said, those things are loaded, it's not just that story. So I don't want it just to become a comic story, though that's also a form. I'm not against it, but somehow that first one was so popular, and I love it. That's me, and I'm the Phantom Lady. And it was 10 years later where I could do this. And that was only because Majlis asked me to, and organized it as well. So in fact, it's very funny because I've been thinking, why don't I do something in Bangalore about Bangalore? And somehow I've never been able to get a hang on the city. Even though I grew up here and I've lived here most of my life, I just can't sort of directly use the architecture, the space of the city to shoot. And maybe I feel embarrassed, or I don't really know that city strangely so well. While I was an outsider in Bombay, and then Bombay again, like, so full of all this mythology of this metropolis, and you read about it and you see it in films. It's just all over even in Kannada, right? Bombay is the Kannada literature. Bombay is the metropolis, and so on. So there's already this kind of these things, these stereotypes, or these cliches, or all those things that I like to work with, or these definitions, or something which, the good and the bad, the rich and the poor, and the city of gold, the city of opportunity, all those, the city of theater, film, so on and so forth, of industry, of the textile mills. There again, it's very interesting with Bharat Mata theater, because there's a very interesting history that it's in the Lalbagh Parel area. And this is apparently that was the entertainment, set up as the entertainment zone by the British for the textile mill workers, because otherwise they would run away. They'd run away to their villages, and then they wouldn't come back. So to lure them back and to keep them entertained here, these cinema halls were set up, and then I think the chawls were also built so that they'd have a place to stay. There again, all this is very relevant to what's happening today, because why are these workers running away? Because they have nothing, And then in the 1930s, Bharat Mata was earlier called Lakshmi Cinema. And then during the Quit India movement, actually all those theaters changed their names. So Lakshmi became Bharat Mata. Then there's also Hind Mata over there, and so on. So there are whole 5 or 6 theaters, with these nationalistic names. And why MNS, I think, was protesting about the closure was it's the single, the one theater in Bombay which has been showing Marathi films only continuously. So it's very much to do with this whole, the mill history, the industrial history, the working class history of Bombay. It's not very obvious, but there are all these underlying stories over there.
Wonderful. Sorry, go ahead.
So would you like to tell us a bit about your selections of site from Mumbai to photograph as a part of this work that you've already mentioned?
Yeah.
Right. Is there anything more that you'd like to add to that? Because I saw a lot of details of these buildings,
Yeah, some of them were personal kind of things that I knew about, and some were suggested by Majlis. See, Majlis had worked with Bharat Mata Cinema. Others, I didn't even know about it. I mean, in the sense I'd vaguely passed through Lalbagh and all that, but I'd never gone really spent much time there. So I got permission to shoot like a whole day in Bharat Mata, which is fantastic. And as I said, they were very, very helpful, and I think it was closed at that time, I'm not sure, because the strike was going on in front. But the projectionists, as I said, even played a bit for me. Then with Dharavi, it's something that I thought about because I had actually worked there and I wanted the Kumbharwada. Then they helped me they introduced me to this guy, this particular potter. And I saw many other locations actually, but they were not really practical because one very interesting slum was actually Behrampada, where of course Madhushree has made a film on Behrampada, and that's just next to Bandra, and it's a strange place because what's very interesting about these slums in Bombay is that they somehow strangely replicate the rest of Bombay. For example, if Bombay is like known for its multi-storied, what our version of skyscrapers, multi-storied buildings, which were not there anywhere else in India, these slums also echo them. Like each tin-roofed thing, house or whatever building has 5 stories. So they keep on building in tin, and there's a hole in the center where there's a ladder, and then you climb up to the next floor, and then there's a roof which is also used. Like the Kumbar was using the roof to dry his pots, for instance. So it's a very interesting architecture. So there you find the, I'm talking about Behrampada, sorry. So Behrampada, when I went in, right in the center, there's a mosque. And the whole thing has got this greenish light. If I remember right, it was years ago, 10 years, more than 10 years ago when I shot. These little lanes, and again, these kind of like ladders going up to these 4-5 storied homes. They're not all homes, they were also enterprises. So I saw one very interesting place, which was, I think, only about 9 feet high. It was there are all kinds of things going on there, little, I don't know what were workshops. They were making shoes, leather shoes. It was a leather thing. I would have loved to have shot there. And within that 8 or 9 feet, there's a mezzanine floor. So over there also you could crawl up. I don't know whether they sleep there or just store things there. So it was a very interesting location. And this whole thing was like this kind of some Ninja Turtle kind of thing, like, some underground feeling, because the light didn't really come in. It had this strange glow. And then you could, there were really 3 feet wide passage going all around, passages going around, and then these ladders reaching up from there. And very interesting. Again, like Madhushree, I think, knew one family there, so I could go up into the family and see how they lived and all that. That was also very interesting. But actually what happened was I couldn't really shoot there because of my costume. I was wearing these small shorts. So they said, no, we won't, allow you to shoot in there, because there was a, religious building in there, and they felt it was like disrespectful and all that. And it was right in the center. So I didn't have that problem in Dharavi, because that part was just like the whole thing was a Kumbharwada. So I decided to shoot there, but I would have also liked to shoot here, for instance. And Gorai was something suggested by Tushar Jog, because I was telling him about this, and he was also one of the villain's henchmen. He also acted as one of the villain's henchmen in the story. And he had, I don't know, worked with these guys, the fishermen over there in Gorai, in the fishing village. I think they had a long protest against SEZ being set up over there. So that was this whole thing of the fishing village. But another personal thing for me was, I was shooting in Bombay in the first Phantom Lady, and I never got in the sea. So the whole thing of Bombay is that there's this thin island, in this sea, surrounded by the sea. And so I just wanted to get in the sea as well somehow. And so the last scene is also the Phantom Lady and the girl escaping on a boat. And then it's like the free sea, in a sense. So we got one of those fishermen to take us out.
Beautiful, yeah. So we're just already on, it's already 11 o'clock. So should we just continue, keep going, Shalini?
It's 11:30, and if there's a question from Jitesh says, can you see the question, please? Is there a way we can see the question? Arsha, can you see the question from Jitesh?
Okay. Yeah. So he says, Pushpa, it would be great to hear you speak about the work at the intersection of performance and photography. Also the idea of film production still as art photography.
Yeah, Jitesh, actually, it's not a film production still. In fact, it's nothing to do with film. They're actually, they're photographs. They're taken as a photograph, and a film production still would be somewhat different, because it is secondary to the film that is being produced, which would be the primary kind of work. But here, in fact, several people have asked me, why do you want to make these photo romances at all? Why don't you just shoot a video? I do also make videos, but I shoot in a completely different way for a video and for photo romance. And also I shoot sometimes when I'm shooting, in fact, usually when I'm shooting my recreations or shooting in my studio, I also get the photographer to shoot the makeup and the process, and that's a part of my work which I also exhibit many times. But those are very different from the photo romances, actually, because in the photo romance, each frame is actually composed, so it's more like a photograph is composed. So it's something that is done between the photographer and myself. So what happens is that when we go on the recce, I look through the camera and I work out different kinds of scenes that I want. I also have notes. I don't make drawings, but I have notes of this, what the scenes are supposed to be like. And then when we start shooting, of course, there's some improvisation because you get ideas when you start working. But it's definitely performances which are done, or mise-en-scènes, I would say, which are specifically created to be photographed, and they're not the process of anything. In fact, these also have a process, as I said, which sometimes are also, which are also photographed. Yeah, one thing I forgot is there was this plan to do the trilogy, the third part of Phantom Lady, because my earlier idea for the Kochi Biennale, which when Jitish invited me to participate, was to do work with the photo romance with the Phantom Lady doing something in Kochi, which is very picturesque actually and very interesting, and with this very interesting history of trade and so on. But that didn't work out due to various reasons. So yeah, that was stopped. But I still have a whole lot of pictures of that, but somehow it doesn't really work.
So we need to get you somebody to invite you to do your trilogy, right?
Yeah. No, it has to click over here, otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah. I need a lot of support. I mean, I need characters and, so it's difficult to, yeah.
So that's wonderful. Yeah, go ahead.
Any other questions, Arshia? That I can't see the question.
So one of the things is also, Pushpa, about performance art, so we were talking about this performance as, the photo still that you took. And so in terms of like performing, did you ever consider that, and how do you look at it in terms of your own practice?
What do you mean by performing? Like
as in performance, as in performing, as in a video, as in performing, not as a photographic body of work, but as in performing.
Yeah, I'm a control freak. So I'm very, very scared of going out into the public and performing. I have started doing live performance, but they're more like lecture perform. I'm planning to do one on Vasco da Gama actually. I mean, that was a very interesting project which I did a lot of reading and research for. So I want to continue that, and I'm working on a lecture performance of that. It was supposed to be in April in Sunaparanta, but everything's been postponed now. But I've been reading for that. Yeah, I mean, just going out into the public and doing something, I feel very, very nervous, and I don't like it. I did one performance in about a cooking performance. There again, I just went and cooked in public. So I cooked this recipe given to me by Gauri Lankesh, who was assassinated, as you know, was a close friend of mine and neighbor. So that was a way of, we used to exchange recipes. So that was a way of commemorating her or celebrating her actually. Because people only write about, these activists and all that as one-dimensional. So that's another kind of thing. But I do perform in my videos, except that it's not very controlled because I don't speak, I can't speak. So people think I'm a good actress or something because I fool them with this, very constructed sort of mise-en-scènes that I do. But actually I can't act for nuts, I'm sorry to say. And in fact, theatre director Prasanna, who's a good friend of mine, once asked me to do some role, and I said, Prasanna, I simply cannot act so on stage. So I have all these things that I do around it so that I don't have to act. So also I don't know how to move the camera. So if you see my videos, they're all a static camera, and it's basically, I'm using the tableau form, but I'm moving around inside it. And you ask me about props, Shalini. So my latest video works of the Good Habits series, which are based on eugenics.
Yes.
So there I got these models, these medical models, and they're very funny actually. I want to do a whole series, but somehow I could do only 3, and I'm a little confused about what to do about the rest. But there I just, there the props become the main thing, and I'm hardly there, and I'm doing something with those props. So for the first time, the props are not just there on the site, but I'm actually, using them to say something. They're central to the work. And with Paris Autumn, which is a 35-minute Again, like Rashtriya Kheer, where we just walk. So I really don't perform. We just walk and write on the blackboard. And there's again a static camera. And with Paris Autumn, there it's a what is it called? Stop motion video where it's made up out of still photographs. What I love is actually the editing part. So I love the editing and the sound part where I sit with the editor, and I don't have a sound person, but I have strong ideas about sound. Though I'm not a great fan of music as such, but I'm very interested in how sound can be used. And but somehow I've never been able to do a sound installation, which I've been thinking about for some time. But in my videos, actually, which have sound, not all of them have sound. I've worked a lot with the editor, and both of us have created this the sound. Yeah.
So Ram Rahman is saying, "I'm ready to act."
Yeah. I think our husbands to act.
Yeah, and Mithu's asked a question. You're on Zoom with your costumes and speaking as an artist, whereas we see you, your Phantom Lady series as photographs. How do you see the performance in both of them, or do you see or do you see they both are performance as an artist and Phantom Lady? This question is by Mithu Sen.
Yeah, I think both of them are performance of different kinds. Some things are more structured and some things are more, freewheeling. I think it's more fun for me. I mean, I feel embarrassed to, come out as my own self and blabber on the screen. So I like to, it sort of disguises you and hides you, behind a mask. And sorry, I can't find my mask. But they're all about masks now.
Pushpa, what about humor in your photographs? I mean, you're the absurd. Like you have to speak about that because all your work is kind of always bordering around that, or if not centered on it. So
yeah, I mean, I love humor and wit, and we've all been reading Woodhouse and Mad Magazine and all that have been great influences on my work. But I really, actually, I should say that I haven't got as mad as I could have, because I'm much more crazy in person. And I've been wanting to do a kind of Marx Brothers, so totally crazy. But I've just been too inhibited actually, because then it becomes public. But in private, I can be quite totally crazy. But also, I use humor and wit, satire, irony, and all these things as strategies in my work. So it's a way of entertainment for one thing, where I think the audience can respond very easily to my work on one level, and it's also a way of overturning things, or like it's also a critique. It's also a kind of creative act, I think. Yeah, it's different kinds of things happening. So, I like to quote I like to quote Bertolt Brecht, who said that that theater should be like football, like in a stadium, like it should be as entertaining as a football game. In a sense that, I mean, I don't think that all work can be like that, because I also love very minimal work, and right now I'm doing these very minimal kind of sculptures. But I like to, it's not only humor is one thing, but also sensuality. I like to bring in sensuality in all my work, and that is also, both of them have been, I think, an ongoing sort of quality in all my works, because I think all the works are sensual and tactile in some way. In fact, several people have made this remark about my photographic work, because I have this background as a sculptor, that the works are, the way I light and the way I do that, it's very, is very sculptural. So, of course, in a series like Phantom Lady, in my photo romances, not all of them, but I use light in a certain way. And also in my photographs, many of my photographs, I like to use very strong contrast lighting, and which sort of models the figures. into looking more three-dimensional. And also, again, the whole sculptural aspect of the set itself. The way the space is used and the way objects are made and set up. So I also use those sets as part of my whatever works. And more and more, I think the sets themselves are going to become part of the installation, or the installation itself, I think, going forward.
Wonderful. So there's a really interesting question from Anita, and she's asking, can you speak about masquerade as a subversive feminist strategy?
Yeah.
And it's to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, like I'm actually touching on all these things which are there everywhere around us, you know. So that's my interest in popular culture, perhaps, or even history and art history and all that, which everybody can recognize. A lot of people can recognize, and then it becomes very real. And I think it's not only masquerade is a very much a part of I think life as such, because we're playing roles, different kinds of roles, you know, from the very beginning. But another interesting thing that I refer to in my work is how this whole nation becomes a masquerade. So I've been very interested in these, you know, the Indian nation, that is. So more than anything else, I don't know what it is, but they're always masquerading. And it starts with the Republic Day parades. And then where, you know, people are masquerading. And then Jyotirmay Jain has this famous thing about how these... the culture ministry used to make the tribal costumes, and then I believe the costumes used to go back and become the real tribal costumes when they went back to their areas. And then, of course, on every Gandhi Jayanti, there are, like, I think hundreds of people all over India dressing up like Gandhi and walking, you know, doing the Dandi March, walking with that stick. And then, you know, just the, you know, Nehru used to do that, and Indira Gandhi, and now the PM Modi, that whenever they visit some area, they have to wear the headdress of that area. You know? So anyway, that is another thing. But yeah, about Anita's question specifically, and on the wider thing, yeah, I mean, it has something to do with performance as well, because performance is also a very, very feminist thing, and or cross-dressing as such, feminist and gay also, I would say. And it's to do a lot with this whole, I'm not sure exactly the reasons why, but possibly, but I like to look at it positively as liberation, you know, liberating yourself by trying to be another. And there's a very interesting family history in that, because my mother was an amateur actress. So she used to, all the photographs I have of her from her childhood is her in different kinds of roles. And many of those roles were actually male roles, because she was actually taller than many of her friends. So I think there's a very early one before she got married. They used to do all these plays, you know. We were very fond of company theatre. So she was Krishna, for instance. Or then she's Kabuliwala, and then she's Balloonwala, and then she's all kinds of old Mysore gentlemen, and very strange. So, but it was not cross-dressing as such. It was playing a role. But she obviously enjoyed it. And there are these very strange family stories where one of my uncles said, oh, your mother, you know, was very funny, because he had just got married in the 50s or something. And then this new bride, my aunt, was there at home. And apparently at dusk, there was a knock on the door. So, sorry. So when she opened it, she found this Swamiji, you know, standing over there. And then that Swamiji barked at her and said, what nonsense, you're so disrespectful. Welcome me in the proper way and all that. So she scuttled off inside and got this aarti and whatnot, like, you know, water and all for him to wash his feet and all that. And finally, that Swamiji started laughing, and it was actually my mother. So she had dressed up for some reason, or she'd come from after a play or something to you know, play a prank on these people. So there's several stories. In fact, when I started doing all this photo performance work, when I came to Bangalore, so I used to keep borrowing things, you know, saris and blah, blah, from various relatives and family friends and all that. And they all had a good laugh and said, oh, you remind us so much of your mother, because, and they used to come up with stories like this. You know, apparently even as Kabuliwala, she went off to some, you know, family friend's place and fooled them, and all that, because and it seems to be, I don't think it's very camp or something. On the one hand, it's seen as camp, but it's also a part of being the other, you know. And that's something I remember even in my MA thesis, when I was doing sculpture, terracotta sculpture at that point, I'd actually written it's about this whole thing of role playing and being the other, and how liberating it is. And maybe for feminists or gay people, or even for straight men. I mean, several of my friends, the minute they get an opportunity, they wear female clothes, and it's a fancy dress. It's always like, you know, being a cabaret dancer or wearing a frock or something like that. And it's not that. It's just fun, you know. It's for that you just escape yourself. And
so we have another question from Premlata Srinivasta. She's asking, how have other artists or genres influenced your sense of aesthetic in your artwork? So your influences.
Yeah, it starts with being in art school in Baroda, and I was very influenced by Bhupen Kakkar, like many of us were. I loved his sense of humor, and that whole pop thing, which was actually very much there in Baroda at that time. The interest in the daily, in the popular, and so on. And I think that also came about. It's interesting. I've been thinking about it actually, because I joined Baroda in 1977, which is just after the emergency. And I think a lot of people, the emergency was, the 70s were a time of major social movements and students' movements, and a lot of questioning of the status quo and what had gone on before, and social justice movements and so on. And I think this whole interest in the popular also at that time was progressive and came out from that. Subramaniam was another one. KG Subramaniam was also using the popular at that point. Both of them were like points of, though I was in the sculpture department, I started sort of using these elements, which already I was interested in, but I didn't know you could use them in art, because art, and especially sculpture, was supposed to be very serious, and then you were supposed to be hacking away at some stone or wood or something like that. So that was very interesting. It was very liberating that you could be funny and you could use humor in sculpture, and I started using it, as a student. And I think later on, I mean, all this kind of reading that I've done, and I was also interested in, everyone sort of, connects my work to Cindy Sherman's work, but actually I was not aware of her work, we were not much connected to American art and all that, even in the 90s, because it was, I think, post 2000 with the internet and email and all that actually, bursting out, that people started knowing more about what is happening everywhere. But our relationships were with Europe, mainly with England, actually, because most people had gone on scholarships to England, or we saw shows from there which were rare, or people went to Paris. I think some other artists had been to Mexico, and during that whole NAM time, like Satish Gujral and Swaminathan and all that, I think Czechoslovakia or something that we did, some of the Eastern European countries. But it was not very, we were not very, familiar with what was going on. But I think the other artist of the 80s I was interested in is Barbara Kruger, Yeah. So her work, and Jenny Holzer, actually, I find, though I've never been able to work with text in that way, it's fantastic the way Jenny Holzer works with text. But Barbara Kruger was actually using original works, in her work, reproducing them and with the text. That actually I found very interesting, and a lot of my work actually reproduces existing images. But I think at that time, in the 90s, there were many people all over the world doing this performance and, playing roles and all that. So that was like a kind of option or a kind of possibility for artists to work. And I got interested in that by chance, because I started with the work I started doing for your show, and then started developing it because I got interested in it. I think a lot of feminist art, and what feminist artists have been doing, no specific person as such, though this history of performance has been there since the beginning of the 20th century, with Marcel Duchamp and so many people, Dali and all these people doing performative works, and part of the international art scene in a certain sense. But also a lot of other things have influenced me, like my interest in film and also theater. From the very beginning, I've been interested in theater, literature, and all these things come into the work, social sciences, things that I read. And it's again, like I would say, it's many things are happening at the same time. So I'm trying to layer my work with these things. And it's that I like to use the word pseudo archive, which I think I mentioned before. And that's actually that whole, that cultural memory or something which is within one's own head and which is always being collected as one goes on, as a person and as an artist. And they're not, they're indivisible actually.
Thank you. Yeah. Shalini, was there any other question?
So no, I think we've had a great, fantastic chat, and thank you, Pushpamala, for being here. And I think it's absolutely great listening to all these amazing stories and the way you went about it. I've been reading so much about your work, but absolute pleasure to have this interaction. And yeah, Arshia.
Yeah, thank you to all the viewers. I think there are quite a few of you. So I hope you enjoyed this session. Pushpa, it was amazing.
Yeah,
So excited. Yeah, so exciting to actually do this given this particular moment that we have. And we are hoping that we'll be able to bring the other artists also who are part of the exhibition on live.
I
So
love
please
thank
stay
you
tuned.
for this whole thing. It's
I'm
really
disrobing.
was the highlight. Actually, I was like, oh my god, I cannot believe that Pushpa is going to be in character, and that's what I told Arshia. I was like, okay, this is unbelievable. And we're getting thank you from lots of people like Aarti Kirloskar, Bhavna Kakkar, who are on the chat as well, and they're all waving to us and thanking us. So, and yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
Shalini, it is great fun actually.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
First Zoom call.
Yeah. First Zoom call or one amazing. First Zoom call. That's fantastic. Thank you.
So thank you everybody and stay tuned for our upcoming seminars. Thanks Pushpa, it was really amazing.
All the best.
Thank you.
You already have your characters, actors ready for your next performance, like Ram Rahman. People, we get lots of messages now from people wanting to be in in your next. So
they have to apply. They have to stand in queue in the circles and squares.
yeah.
Social
Vijay Churaria is also here. He's saying really interesting and thanking us all. So
wonderful.
Thank you, Vijay and Sunita, for being here. Thank you, Anita. Yeah, perfect. Thank you,
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, till next time. Yeah, absolutely.
I my hat because I don't want to expose the gray hair.
Yes, switch this off now. We can have we are going off live now. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.